Okay, sorry for the short delay there, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar on our complete guide to corporate restructures. So joining me today is one of Navigo's HR tech specialists, Michelle Clancy, and my name's Grant Cumming. You've probably recognised my voice from the last couple of webinars. So we're going to talk you through how to overcome the common issues we see every day from activities associated with restructures, and we will be discussing ways on how to overcome these. But first, we will just start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So today, you will be able to hear us. We won't be able to hear you. If you do have any questions, or if you have any comments that you would like to let us know of, if you could please just click the Q&A bar in the menu bar down the bottom of the menu bar there, and then click send once you've entered in the message. And what we'll do is we'll actually have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. All right, so over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, everyone, for attending today. I hope you enjoyed those pictures of my daughter that came up in before we started, but let's get on with today's webinar. Today's webinar is it's some really great timing for some of the customers that we have joining us today, because I know that some of you are about to begin, you're in the middle of, or you've actually just finalised some painful restructure activity. So I know you're going to come away from this webinar session with some valuable information. But let's begin by talking about key factors that affect our businesses. So organisations, they operate in a dynamic world where there are a number of different factors which are outside of our control that cause change. This being our economy, technology and competition. So, for example, the global financial crisis hit a few years ago. There was limited warning, and it did bring about quite a bit of chaos for HR departments. For many years now, our manufacturing industry has experienced major challenges, and we've also got our resources sector, which has enjoyed many years of the so-called boom, but you would all know is now experiencing quite a decline. As we've seen the economic landscape change considerably over the past decade, we've also seen technology constantly changing in line with these business demands. To assist in this overwhelming cycle of change management, some organisations do embrace technology, and they use it to increase productivity and efficiency. We see cutting-edge technology introduced almost every week, so it's no wonder technology budgets are starting to get more attention. However, we also see organisations struggle to keep up with this technology, and they retain their legacy issues. In terms of competition, each Australian industry is a competitive one, and it's in the Aussie culture to be competitive, and we have to be in order to survive as organisations. Competition is one of the key drivers, which adds to the level of constant change. It's these factors that will have a direct impact on your organisational structure. Depending on the nature of your organisation, how long it's been operating, what industry you work in, or even which government is in power, the impact caused by economic, technological and competitive factors are an increase in growth, which is one of the more favourable impacts, and it's planning for future development and expansion of organisations. A merger or acquisition, organisations which join forces, we see, and we also quite regularly see organisational takeovers as well. You could be experiencing a restructure of your existing business or team, which does sound straightforward, but it really isn't. And downsizing, which is reducing the size and cost of your existing business. Once one or more of these factors has impacted your organisation, you do need to plan for the necessary changes. So I'm now going to take you through what we call the anatomy of a restructure. And these are some key points you need to consider before beginning any kind of restructure projects. The first key point is your objectives. What is it that you're trying to achieve by doing this restructure? It's really important for these objectives to be visible during the whole project, and it's so you can see how close or how far away you are from achieving them. Some of the common objectives are to merge a business or a team together, to clean up your organisational design, which might include balancing or reducing the number of levels within the organisation, or fixing the span of control for managers. To move to a new business model, for example, moving from a product-based model to a functional-based model, or to reduce the headcount and cost of the organisation. We're actually going to skip the poll for today's session, unfortunately. So we were going to do a poll about what you guys see as being the most common reason for restructuring within your organisation. From the intelligence that we do already have existing, and it does depend on year to year, we do find that reducing headcount and cost does seem to be the most common reason. But throughout the past 12 months, we have been able to work with organisations as they are acquiring businesses. So we are seeing a real mixed bag of different restructuring activity. So we are going to move on and take a look at one of the objectives which we worked. This is a real life example of working with a corporation whose main goal was to clean up their organisational design, and their objective was to have a more balanced organisation structure. So the business rules, they were pretty simple on the face of it. Our brief consisted of two key goals. One was that the organisation was to be limited to 9 levels of management. And the second was that each manager had to have at least 4, but no more than 10 direct subordinates reporting to them. So how do we assist them achieve this? We started by giving them a visual of their org structure to help identify if they were reaching their goals. The chart used what we call their visual alarms or conditional formatting. You might have heard that terminology before. And that highlighted when a manager has too many or not enough direct reports. It also displayed the deepest branch in the hierarchy so that we could easily identify the maximum number of levels for each branch. This visual or organisational chart quickly showed us that in some areas of the business, the hierarchy was 13 levels deep, and a large number of managers didn't have enough direct reports. So we could identify where we could concentrate on the areas of the business more quickly. They used this visual perspective throughout the whole restructure project to ensure that they had a balanced organisational design as the final result. The next key point is outputs. What do you need as a result of the restructure? Well, you need to have a model of the changes, and ideally this would be a visual perspective of the workforce, and that's a good way to work with the business on the required changes. So we've seen this done in a couple of different ways. Having a model of both the current state and future state of the organisation to be able to see a visual comparison of the two. I've seen a model of both option A and option B along with the current state models, so a visual comparison can be done on both ideas. With the future state models, we generally see the removal of employee names from the chart, and that gives it a much more objective view. Different models also can be used for different audiences. For example, you might have a model to show to the business, and that would display information such as employee names and other details for the business. But you might also have another model to show the union, which is position-based only. Again, conditional formatting can be used to highlight different changes in the chart, such as highlighting a new position. Once the models have been approved, ideally you want to have data to be imported back into your HR system or payroll, or a delta of changes to make. You'll also want some analytics about your restructure. For example, what the final head count, total cost, number of positions being made redundant, the number of new hires, etc. Remembering all of this all of this activity is taking place before any decisions have actually been implemented, and it makes for a much better decision-making process. Another organisation we worked with needed to produce charts that highlighted positions with the proposed changes. It was really quite simple. They highlighted in different colours if a position was going to be made redundant. So you can see that on the chart there, the redundant positions are in pink. If they were going to be reappointed elsewhere, which we changed to a yellow colour, or a new role, or needed a data change. So every time this was happening, the chart was reflecting those changes. It was this chart that was used to consult with the business on the proposed changes before they even occurred. Once the changes were finalised, another version of this chart with the employee names was removed, and this was used in order to consult with the relevant unions. We produced two separate charts, current state and future state, so they could easily visually compare the proposed changes, and that was really much easier than analysing an Excel spreadsheet. We also produced a summary of the changes from the proposed restructure so that they could see the impact. So in the profile pane that you can see in that chart to the left-hand side, we've added some key information like the actual number of redundancies and number of new roles, and the total number of positions. This way, the impact of their changes could be immediately seen as they were working through the project. Now we've seen what the objectives and what the outputs are, we need tools that are going to assist us to achieve these. So Grant's going to chat to you about what the different tools are available.
So when taking on a large project like a restructure, the tools that you use do play a critical part in how much effort is involved. Here is a horror story example of a restructure that we could easily turn around using the appropriate tools. So Navigo arrived at the customer's premises where our brief was to assist in a restructure project that we had already started. We were taken into a room with no windows, one door, and a rainbow of post-it notes on the walls. They were using a post-it note for each position. The post-it notes were color-coded by department, and it did look a little bit like a kindergarten classroom. Using the post-it notes, they could move positions around, as you may have guessed. Using this method as a tool for their organisational-wide restructure was clearly troubled with many risks and issues. This customer was not an existing Navigo customer and didn't have any tool to assist with a project of this kind. They came to us to find the right tool and assist with the process in order to get things on track. In this case, we implemented Plan and Model, so that we were able to create models to reproduce what was on the post-it notes. This allowed them to easily view their different proposed scenarios without having to move post-it notes around or come in the next morning and find them on the floor with no way of knowing where they came from. They were also able to export the data into a spreadsheet at the end. I have no idea how you would be able to export post-it notes. Another organisation, and this is quite typical of most organisations that we work with, were using Excel as their only tool for their restructure. They had the hierarchy together with the proposed hierarchy in a spreadsheet. However, they were unable to visualise it. It wasn't until we were able to import this massive spreadsheet into planning at work did they really know what the hierarchy looked like. We've also seen Visio used on many occasions, but the thing to remember is Visio is a diagramming tool and wasn't designed for restructuring purposes. So, now that we have the tools, who's going to drive the overall project? So Michelle will chat to you now about the importance of putting together the right project team.
One of the difficulties with restructures is that only a select group in the organisation knows about it, and that's rightly so, just due to its very sensitive nature. So ensuring that you've got the right staff available to assist needs to be managed carefully. The people you have working on your restructure can be a key in making it successful. Some of the main roles which do differ across organisations that you need to be involved in the project are a human resources officer or equivalent to work on the required models for the project, a data analyst, or as many as you need, that has advanced Excel skills and will be able to assist with the data-related processes throughout the project, like merging the data together and validating and importing the data. Finally, you need contacts within the business so that you can liaise with them when making decisions on the restructure. In our experience, having data analysts involved can make a big difference in the time it takes for completion. When they're involved, they can assist with many of the data issues, including the data merging process and validation, so that the team don't have to wait for someone else to get these important stages done, and it's usually these stages that can hold up the project. But now we know the team, how should they work together? So if you have multiple people working independently on the restructure, this will increase the complexity of the project, since you're going to need to have multiple processes, including a data merge process, to ensure that to ensure there's consistency in your data. Organisations collaborate differently, but one example I'm about to talk you through used plan and model to produce their restructure, and the other example has multiple people working on multiple models at the same time. The first example had a number of employees working together on the project. They projected plan and model up onto the screen in a boardroom, and one of the employees stood at the screen and was moving positions around with his hand, sort of CSI style. And he was doing that while there was input from other members of the team who were attending. So while the decisions were being made, I was able to make the changes on the computer instantly. They loved the speed in which they could see the results of the change and the instant recalculation of formulas. And the formulas we were using included things such as headcounts and total costs. In this example, we only used one model that all of the employees were working on together, and this reduced the need for any data merging or complex processes on how to create the scenario. The next example has employees that are actually independently working on the restructures, and they were across different areas of the business, but it was happening all at the same time. So to handle this, separate models were created and assigned to the appropriate people to work on. Once their changes had been made, we then exported all of the data from the separate models individually, and then we merged it all together. This also raised the need for a consistent project to ensure that all the models were handled in the same way. So a written process for the employees was created, and we needed to explain how to handle new positions, new employees, employee transfers to different areas, how to handle employees who have left or made redundant. It was actually quite a list. So you can see how doing it this way easily increased the complexity of the project. But in saying that, neither example is right or wrong. It really is determining what suits your situation the best. And this might also be impacted on the time frame you have to complete the project as to how you go about it. So that brings us to time. How long does your project team have to complete this restructure? And does the restructure need to be completed all at the same time, or can it be a phased approach, completing, say, one department or team at a time? The time frame that you have will impact on the number of people you have working on the project and the different processes that you adopt. Completing one department at a time might result in a more time-consuming process with complicated data mergers. Also, the longer that you have to complete the restructure, the more changes that are naturally occurring throughout the business in the background. So, for example, the business will still be hiring new employees and employees will be leaving, etc. A project we recently worked on had a time frame of 1 month to complete an organisation-wide restructure, and that involved a couple of thousand employees. They completed the restructures of departments separately, so we were required to do a data merge at the end. However, since the whole project was completed within 1 month, we didn't have to deal with too many changes to the organisation that had occurred during that time. Whereas another organisation took over an entire year to complete their project, and in this time they had to recreate their models many times over to ensure they had the latest data set. So I have mentioned data a few times now, and it is probably the trickiest part of these projects, but I'm going to hand you over to Grant, who's going to talk about data in more detail.
Right, so potential data issues need to be thought about before you start. So most organisations that we've worked with haven't had their current state right before starting these projects. And this is generally due to not having an organisation chart at all, or one that is updated on a regular basis. If you had bad data to begin with, you will have bad data throughout the whole process. So it's the rubbish in, rubbish out concept. The most common issue with the current state is that the hierarchy is wrong to begin with. For example, positions are not reporting to the correct positions, or there are orphans or broken hierarchy, meaning positions without a manager, which is due to data issues with the hierarchy. We find that viewing the hierarchy visually to be the easiest way to verify that the hierarchy is correct. Obviously, it is important for this to be accurate for you to be able to identify the impact of the changes in restructure correctly. In some of the projects that we have worked on, updating the current state has been the most time-consuming part of the project. Once the restructure process has been completed and approved, one of the many tasks that has to occur is to reflect the changes back into your core systems. So unfortunately, there is no quick fix solution to this stage. However, there are a number of things you will need to consider to make this easier. So if you have multiple people collaborating on the restructure, a data migration process will need to occur. Previously, we have achieved this by joining multiple model data extracts together. We would also recommend that you have a data validation process to ensure that all positions have reports to, and that employee and position numbers exist with the right number of digits or characters. I've seen this automated using both Excel macros and conditional formatting and planning at work charts to easily identify issues in the data. Do you have any duplicated positions or employees that may have been caused by interdepartmental transfers and the data merging process? Again, Excel is your best friend with this issue, and we don't say that very often. However, formulas can be created in Excel to highlight and remove duplicates in the data. Depending on your core system, the data's format may also have to be manipulated to be able to import back into your core systems. For example, ensuring fields are in the right order. Once you have this sorted out, you may also need to think about whether these changes will impact any other fields in the data, like the cost center or account codes a position is assigned to. One organisation that we worked with started another project once they had completed the restructure to identify what cost centres would be impacted by this change and the type of impact to the cost centre. They modelled this using flags in Plan and Model to highlight the affected cost centres.
Thanks, Grant. So really that's the main points we wanted to cover as part of today's webinar, but just to recap what we've talked about. So in terms of restructures, what is the objective? What are you actually trying to achieve by doing this restructure? The outputs, what do you need as a result of the restructure? The tools you're using, finding the right tools so you don't end up with post-it notes all over the floor. People, you need to get the right skill set for the project. It has a huge impact. Collaboration, work out how your team will work on this project before it starts. And your time frame. How does time impact your project, and realistically, how much time do you really have? And as we've just talked about data, you need to consider issues you may have with your current state data and how you're going to import any changes back into your core system. So by considering the key points discussed today, you should see a dramatic improvement in any future restructure projects you're unlucky enough to be involved in. But thanks everyone for attending today, and I'm going to pass you back to Grant so we can take some questions.
All right. So do we have any questions that we can address?
Yeah, I can. We've got one through already, which is talking about matrix reporting lines and how they're best handled in restructure scenarios. So in Excel, it's pretty hard to identify matrix reporting lines, but we do use Planning at Work and All Plus to identify matrix reporting. So you'll actually have combined boxes where where it will actually show the employee where they actually sit outside of the structure. So you'll have a box in the chart that has the employee sitting there, and then we have a link to where they're also reporting into, so that information is captured as well, and that sort of scenario or situation in the data isn't missed, so it is highlighted there.
Okay, got another one here. What differences have you seen when organisations have planned a model at the very beginning of a restructure?
Oh, good question. Having a tool like Plan and Model, the biggest feedback we get is how it impacts the decision-making process amongst many things, but it's really about having a much more informed decision-making process in terms of the restructure itself. So it's giving the business the insight into what the actual proposed structure is going to look like, but also how this impacts those key things such as headcount and cost, and your FTE and things like that. You know, having them armed with that information before the project even starts is really invaluable. And a lot of the times I see changes, in scope just based on the information that they have before they proceed. So that's probably the biggest impact, and definitely time and grey hairs. There's definitely trying to manage really large restructures using Excel, or I've seen Visio as well, can be quite stressful.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Michelle. All right, so no more questions at this stage. If you do have any further questions though that you'd like to ask us offline, please feel free to give us a call or send us an email.
All right, thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and absolutely give us a call if you require anything else.
Thank you very much.